Warning: social media platforms may be hazardous to your health. Censorship kills. Pain coming. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre.
Well, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Spectre here. It is the 7th day of December here, or Tuesday. Hopefully you guys are doing well. A little bit chilly in this neck of the woods here, down in the teens here this morning. So apparently we've gotten some of that dip that came down from Canada. Thanks for that. We'll talk about the weather here in just a little bit, but we'll take a spin through the old marketplace here this morning, talk a little bit more about the old Trump media venture and what all is going on there. We'll talk a little bit about natural gas. Oh, a little bit by way of the major chains net that have been looted and more looting going on across the country here, visualizing the uneven fallout of the inflation surge, backlogs on some Class 8 trucks, things of that nature, and of course all this business of ESGs and decarbonization. We're going to get into all that and a little bit more, so stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, Spectre here. Just wanted to give a big thank you to all you guys who continue to support my work. Day in, day out on the streams, support all the various pieces I put out, etc., etc. And in doing so, I figured what the heck, we'll put some merch out there if you guys wish to continue to support and help defray some of the costs of streaming, which many of you guys know many of us incur. Got a handful of shirts and ad here. Spectre Does News. We got the Realize, Real Lies shirt and that you hear on my PSA periodically. And of course the No BS insignia from the show I do over on the 5x5 channel, all of which you can get for the low price of $19.99. Aside from that, you can get the Let's Go Brandon hashtag FJB shirt as well in a variety of colors. And I've recently added the hoodies in a variety of colors you can get right there as well. And last but not least, you can grab yourself a No BS shirt and the Zip Up hoodie as well. If you don't want any articles of clothing, well, you can grab yourself a mug or a 20-ounce water tumbler if you wish. Your choice. And of course, as always, just want to thank you, the listeners, the audience, those who are in chat day in, day out. Thank you for your continued support.
All right into it we go here this morning. Weather-wise, not looking too bad, aside from it being a little bit chilly where I'm at here in the old Midwest. Looks like across the southwest here we may have a few little disturbances cruising across California, maybe bottom half of Nevada, Arizona into New Mexico. Got a little bit going on through the old Midwest here and a little bit shaking out here in the eastern seaboard and that. Temperature-wise, as mentioned, well, yeah, we get a little bit of this stuff coming down out of Canada here, and we're down in the teens here this morning. Hopefully we'll warm up, but you can see the big pocket net that has dropped down there, so stay warm, everybody. That being said, let's get into it here this morning. Stocks soar on optimism. Omicron is a dud as traders focus on growing China stimulus. U.S. index futures rallied, led by gains by NASDAQ 100 contracts amid waning Omicron worries, and a booster shot of Chinese stimulus lifted world stock markets and oil on Tuesday and left traders offloading safe haven currencies and bonds for the second day in a row. E-mini S&P futures were up 61 points to 4650 and change, or about 120 points higher than where Gartman said stocks are headed lower some 24 hours ago. NASDAQ futures are up 1.8% and Dow futures rose 1% in pre-market trading. In fact, futures are just now 50 points away from where they were below the Black Friday Omicron the panic plunge rather. So apparently it took a little over a week to recover that. Now it's a matter of whether or not we'll see the old Santa rally and that typically happens this time of year. Here's the E-mini S&P futures as always. The FTSE Euro First 300 index was on track for its first back-to-back run of plus 1% gain since February, while Asia saw record bounces from some of China's biggest firms, such as Alibaba, which soared by the most since its 2019 listing in Hong Kong, leading a rebound in Chinese tech stocks as bargain hunters piled in and improved sentiment following Beijing's move to bolster the economy. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index climbed 1.7%, while Japan's Topix Index closed 2.2% higher. The VIX dropped for a second day, sliding below 24, but remained above this year's average. So aside from that, we'll flash down into what is moving throughout here today. And let's see here. Oh, apparently not much. So anyway, it looks like market snapshot. S&P 500 futures are up 1.3%, 46.50 even. Stocks Europe 600 up 1.7%, 476.71. Nikkei is up 1.9%, 28.455 and change. The Shanghai Composite up 0.2%, 3595.09. Brent futures up 2.3%, 74.73 a barrel. Gold spot flat at 1778.95 per ounce. US dollar index little change at 96.36 and euro down 0.2% to 1.1268. So, some of the overnight news out of Bloomberg: the ECB said its supervision arm will focus its scrutiny in the coming 3 years on risks that lenders face from a potential spike in bad loans and their search for higher returns. Hungary's central bank is nowhere close to stopping a monetary tightening campaign that will make the country's real interest rates the highest in Central Europe, Deputy Governor Barnabas Vireg said. The U.S. and European allies are weighing sanctions targeting Russia's biggest banks and the country's ability to convert rubles for dollars and other foreign currencies should President Vladimir Putin invade Ukraine, according to people familiar with the matter. China's exports and imports grew faster than expected in November, with both hitting records as external demand surged ahead of the year-end holidays and domestic production rebounded on an easing power crunch. Some China Evergrande Group bondholders have not received overdue coupon payments after the end of a month-long grace period, putting the world's most indebted property developer on the brink of its first default on offshore notes. UK house prices hit a record in November, with values over the past 3 months rising at their fastest pace for 15 years, according to mortgage lender Halifax. Aside from that, over to News Squawk, and over in Asia, Asia stock set for the best day in 3 months as China tech rebounds. Alibaba jumps most since Hong Kong listing as China tech rebounds. Malaysia court dismisses Najib's plea, SRC verdict due on Wednesday. And LG Energy seeks up to 12 and 3/4 ton one IPO, the biggest in Korea. And aside from that, top European news: UK house prices post strongest quarterly increase since 2006. Republicans Pécresse ties with Le Pen in French poll. Ferguson first quarter U.S. organic revenue beats estimates, and EU aims to unveil green rules for gas and nuclear projects on December 22nd. Aside from that, the event calendar today, a few things kicking off at 8:30 a.m. this morning. We got third quarter unit labor costs estimate at 8.3. Prior was the same. Third quarter non-farm productivity estimate down 4.9%. Prior was down 5. October trade balance estimate down 66.8 billion. Prior was 80.9 billion. And at 3 p.m. we got October consumer credit estimate of 25 billion. Prior print was a 29.9 billion. So a little bit of a round tripper through the old market here this morning. And of course, aside from that, Trump media venture slides as SEC demands documents. This was one of a couple of headlines that come out yesterday, the other of which we'll get into here momentarily. But we've talked quite a bit about Trump's SPAC and where that's headed, and of course, whether or not somebody like Pocahontas might be hot on the heels to try and figure out what's going on with this, because, that's what they do. The shares of the new Trump media SPAC skidded Monday shortly after U.S. markets opened, after the firm announced over the weekend that it had succeeded in raising $1 billion private capital dollars in its infusion, more formally known as a PIPE, valuing the shell company with Trump's name on it at $4 billion. Apparently, the SPAC's surging valuation has caught the eye of authorities, which is why DWAC was forced to announce Monday that it is cooperating with the SEC, sending its shares sputtering lower. Shares were off $10 from their recent highs on the news. Says in the 8K filing, the company revealed that it has received notifications from both FINRA and the SEC demanding documents. The company insists it's cooperating. DWAC has received certain preliminary fact-finding inquiries from regulatory authorities, which it is cooperating. Specifically, in late October and early November 2021, DWAC received a request for information from FINRA surrounding events, specifically a review of trading, that preceded a public announcement of the October 20th, 2021 merger agreement. It says, according to FINRA's request, the inquiry should not be construed as an indication that FINRA has determined that any violation of NASDAQ rules or federal security laws have occurred, nor as a reflection upon the merits of the securities involved or upon any person who affected transactions in such securities. Right. They just pulled this out of thin air, and of course, how many other SPACs have they gone after? Zero. And because it's Trump, well, here we are. Additionally, in early November 2021, DWAC received a voluntary information and document request from the SEC, which sought, inter alia, documents relating to meetings of DWAC's board of directors, policies and procedures relating to trading, the identification of banking, telephone, and email addresses, the identities of certain investors, and certain documents and communications between DWAC and the TMTG. According to the SEC's request, the investigation does not mean that the SEC has concluded that anyone violated a law or that the SEC has a negative opinion of DWAC or any person, event, or security. Again, SEC, how many other SPACs have you gone after? Oh, zero? So anyway, both regulators are sniffing around for rule violations, but at least the SEC is being somewhat transparent about the fact that it is a massive fishing expedition. But we can't help but wonder if they would be as aggressive under a Republican administration. Exactly. Because it's got Trump on it. The Trump derangement syndrome persists. They cannot help themselves. And so here we are. So aside from that, and still in the news yesterday, Devin Nunes is leaving Congress to become the Trump Media SPAC CEO. So perhaps Nunes will get things sorted out here and maybe grease the skids through the FINRA and SEC business. Who knows? 10-term Congressman Rep. Devin Nunes announced his retirement from Congress at the end of this month to serve as CEO of the Trump Media and Technology Group. What do you think? Good fit? You know, Nunes has certainly been an advocate for Trump over the years, doing a lot of legwork behind the scenes. Recently, I was presented with a new opportunity to fight for the most important issues I believe in. I'm writing to tell you, to let you know I've decided to pursue this opportunity, and therefore I will be leaving the House of Representatives at the end of 2021, Nunes said in a vaguely worded Monday statement. Rest assured, I have not, by any means, given up our collective fight. I'll just be pursuing it through other means. Concurrent with his announcement, the Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG, announced in a press release that Nunes, currently the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, had been selected to join the company as the CEO. Mr. Nunes is currently a sitting U.S. House Representative representing California's 22nd Congressional District and formerly the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Nunes will be leaving the U.S. House of Representatives and will begin his new role as CEO of TMTG in January of 2022. Former President Trump said of the move, Congressman Devin Nunes is a fighter and a leader. He will make an excellent CEO of TMTG. Devin understands that we must stop the liberal media and big tech from destroying the freedoms that make America great. America is ready for Truth Social and the end to censorship and political discrimination. And I guess I'll pause right there and remember, maybe you guys might remember, that it was Nunes that took the fight to Twitter in a $250 million suit, is it not? I believe so. Granted, probably didn't get very far with the courts and that we have here today. However, at least he is one of a handful of folks, Nat, who have opted to go after big tech. And I think a lot of that had to do with a spoof account, if I recall correct. Anyway, Nunes, meanwhile, said the time has come to reopen the internet and allow for the free flow of ideas and expression without censorship. The United States of America made the dream of the internet a reality, and it will be an American company that restores the dream. I'm humbled and honored President Trump has asked me to lead the mission and the world-class team that will deliver on this promise. The news comes after TMTG announced a $1 billion private capital infusion over the weekend, formerly known as a PIPE, which values the company at $4 billion. And of course, shares sold off on Monday. However, after the company revealed in its 8K filing that it received notifications from both FINRA and the SEC demanding documents, the company insists that it's cooperating. And we just read that, so I'll skip over that. Shares in the TMTG, the symbol on the old ticker is DWAC, were up as much as 10% after hours. So the announcement comes out early part of the day. Hey, they're under investigation. SEC, stock drops. Well, we prop that right back up with some good headlines and say, hey, Nunes is going to be the CEO, and whoop, here we go. We're back to the good. See how that works, folks? It's all about the algos and headlines. Aside from that, U.S. natural gas continues plunge on unexpectedly mild weather for mid-December. Well, I don't know. At least where I'm at, like I said, we're in the teens here, so maybe it's coming yet. I don't know. U.S. natural gas futures continued an epic plunge Monday after weather forecasts showed temperatures across the U.S. will be well above seasonal trends through at least the midpoint of December. Contracts for January stumbled 8% to $3.80 per million British thermal units, the lowest intraday price since late August. Prices have slid upwards of 40% since early October as it first became apparent the U.S. had ample supplies of natural gas, and temperature forecasts were beginning to show warmer weather trends. So apparently there's the old natural gas futures for December. Oh, haven't been that low since August, and hopefully, perhaps, maybe the United States will get a little bit of a reprieve this winter, stay a little bit above normal temperatures, and again, give us a bit of a reprieve on the old gas bill. It says Bloomberg's 2-week outlook shows mean temps across the U.S. lower 48 will be well above a 30-year average through December 21st. At some points, temperatures could be 10 degrees Fahrenheit over the seasonal averages. So break out the shorts and tank tops, apparently, huh? Well, maybe not. But anyway, Steven Stepzinski says U.S. natural gas futures continue to plummet. Prices are under pressure due to forecasts from milder than normal temperatures for December, higher domestic gas production over the last few weeks, and a recent slide in overseas LNG prices. And there we see that depicted on the downward trend. We'll take it. Above average temperatures forecast for December 11th through the 15th, which should curb demands for heating fuels like natural gas. This is what they're depicting. It looks like that's out of NOAA there. So perhaps we may see a bit of a reprieve. Above average temperatures mean heating demand for building structures such as homes and businesses will decline. This is reflected on the U.S. lower 48 heating degree day chart below. So again, mind you, these are all models and could be subject to change, just like every other model in that we've seen blown apart. So take it for what it's worth. It says due to warmer weather and the rising supply of natural gas from the Marcellus Shale region, Morgan Stanley wrote in a note that prices are skewed to the downside. The bank sees natural gas prices averaging around $3.75 in 2022. It says another way to view the natural gas market is through the so-called Widowmaker spread between March and April Henry Hub contracts. In early October, the spread soared to $1.90 per million British thermal units as traders bet on tight inventories and cold temperatures, but have since reversed to now 23 cents, a complete collapse as outlooks forecast milder weather. So, screw you speculators. If the weather stays warm and we don't have to use as much, that's good for you and I. The hell with all the frickin' speculators. Across the Atlantic, European natural gas markets are the complete opposite as the continent struggles with low supplies and frigid temperatures. Well, not to mention that Russia controls everything from Gazprom and the fact that the Nord Stream 2 still is not approved through regulations and everything else. It's almost as if they've done that on purpose, right? So anyway, Europe has kind of brought it on themselves, unfortunately. Aside from that, security is heightened at major store chains after a series of flash mob robberies. We've talked quite a bit about that over the last several weeks, stuff that's playing out in San Francisco and Chicago and just general lawlessness. So we get this out of Brian Jung over at the Epoch Times, says security is being boosted in retail outlets across the country this holiday shopping season as stores and law enforcement face a pandemic of organized retail crime by smash and grab mobs. Yeah, perfectly okay per AOC in recent days, who basically said, huh, that's all in your head. That's really not existent. Apparently, she's taken a playbook out of Nadler's deal and whether or not Antifa even exists. It's all hearsay, right? Major stores like Home Depot, CVS, Target, and Best Buy have been some of the worst afflicted by the flash mob raids, which have increased in scope and in size in recent weeks. Stores in California, Illinois, and Minnesota have been repeatedly attacked in the last few weeks, with the Bay Area being hit hard in particular. It says at the end of November, a well-coordinated gang raided a San Francisco area Nordstrom, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of items. Bystanders watched helplessly as dozens of looters and cars drove up to the store and overwhelmed the staff, ransacking shelves and terrorizing customers before driving away, with police making only a handful of arrests. Only a few days later, a brazen mob of 40 looters ransacked a Louis Vuitton and other stores in San Francisco's Union Square. A San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Bowden, which by the way is a Soros plant, charged 9 people for allegedly participating in the Louis Vuitton incident, which cost retailers more than $1 million in losses. Now, wait a minute here. I thought the whole thing with them was that, if it's under $1,000, they couldn't be prosecuted. So is that, I suppose, you get 100 people all stealing $1,000, that adds up to $1 million? Or did they exceed the $1,000 threshold? I don't know, just a question I ask. Says in the suburbs of Minneapolis, dozens of people stole goods from Best Buy stores over the Thanksgiving weekend, and the size of the groups and the organized nature of the crimes have overwhelmed store staff and security personnel and have put a strain on local law enforcement. Critics are blaming the increase in serious property crimes on left-wing district attorneys and permissive policies by state governments that encourage such activities. Gee, you think? What'd you think was going to happen when they roll all this back and, cut things down like bonds and everything else to bail yourself out? Total lawlessness. Says in California, 2014 law downgraded the theft of less than $950 worth of goods from a felony to a misdemeanor. Says we're trying to control it the best we can, but it's growing every day, said Ben Dugan, president of the Coalition of Law Enforcement and Retail, speaking to the Wall Street Journal. He said that retailers are expanding their security presence as a short-term response to the type of theft seen over the past few weeks. Says law enforcement and retail executives suspect that these incidents are being conducted by organized criminal networks that recruit young people to steal items to be sold for profit online. It is thought that the gangs are exploiting the recent growth in e-commerce during the scamdemic, which has led to more demand for underpriced goods online. The National Retail Federation estimates that organized retail crime, which is a crime distinct from shoplifting, has cost retailers an average of $700,000 per $1 billion in sales. National and local retailers are currently lobbying for new federal and state legislation that would make the online reselling of stolen goods more difficult. Does that make sense? Should they do that, or should they just fix the problem that they themselves created? Is this yet another problem reaction solution here? Throw more lobbyists at it? Create more laws? Put more crap on the books? Do we not have enough stinking laws on the books already? Says many of these stolen goods are being resold online anonymously through Amazon.com, Facebook Marketplace, and on other platforms. Spokespersons from Meta Platforms Inc., which hosts Facebook Marketplace, and from Amazon have told the Wall Street Journal that they are assisting the crackdown on the sale of stolen merchandise sold on their websites. They said they are working closely with local law enforcement and affected retailers, and are encouraging their customers to report suspiciously listed items. A coalition of district attorneys in the Bay Area are working together to combat organized retail theft to break up the criminal networks that make it profitable. The California Highway Patrol announced that they are working with retailers and local California law enforcement to round up these smash and grab suspects. States like Florida and Illinois are also setting up special retail crime task forces to better coordinate efforts in fighting the crime wave. So, anyway, there is that. Obviously, if you perhaps head to any one of the stores listed above, perhaps you may see some additional folks in that hanging out at the doorways, and the the ridiculousness of it all is that it could be stopped in an instant. At the end of the day, we got an armed society. Guess what? An armed society is a polite society. Put one of those puppies down, and guess what? All this crap is going to quit in a quick hurry. I suggest, Wild Wild West type stuff? No. But obviously, it would certainly cure that right quick. So, aside from that, the looters are becoming so brazen, now they're stealing weed. Looters target California pot shops, stealing $5 million worth of product. Says after a year of increasing retail thefts across the San Fran Bay Area, thieves are becoming more brazen as they unleash flash mob lootings at high-end retail stores, which we just got done describing. Says criminal gangs have also begun to target marijuana businesses. Oh, what a great combination. Loot the old pot shops, get high, and then go off to Best Buy, and away you go, huh? So, according to the nonprofit group Supernova Women, criminal groups targeted at least 15 licensed cannabis businesses in November, vandalizing stores and offices and stealing products worth millions of dollars. Cannabis companies impacted by the spate of robberies are requesting state and local government agencies for financial help. Says all types of licensed cannabis businesses were impacted: cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and retail, delivery, and storefronts. Cumulatively, these small and mostly equity licensed businesses are now faced with over $5 million in losses, said Supernova Women. Says one business owner told MJ Biz Daily that he knows of 25 or so businesses that got hit by smash and grab robberies last month. Says I know 25 or so businesses that got hit, and out of all those, the percentage I know that told me that they may not be able to reopen is about 50%, said Tucky Blunt, the owner of Oakland cannabis shop Blunts and More. He said his shop was one of those robbed, adding that gangs believe marijuana businesses are sitting on boatloads of cash. Says people think we're sitting on millions and millions of dollars, Blunt said. We don't have that. Others say the spat of robberies could spell financial trouble for impacted pot shops. Any loss, any blow is a death blow potentially at this point, said Nara Del Baca, a California consultant who works with several cannabis companies. So there are a lot of businesses that are on the edge right now. And according to RNC research here, says the owner of a cannabis dispensary in Oakland, California, says, I was safer selling weed on the streets of Oakland than I am selling it legally in the Democrat-run city. That's a problem.
A former convict says he felt safer during his life of crime.
Appears that's stuck there, but anyway, we get the idea. Says a lot of these folks are not open and won't be open for a while because they can't bounce back from these things, said Amber Center, the co-founder and chair of Oakland nonprofit Supernova Women. She said many of the targeted small pot shops don't have a lot of extra capital, plus adding insurance coverage is nearly impossible. Says to prevent criminals from believing all pot shops are cash-heavy companies, the passage of the federal Safe Banking Act would allow a legitimate cannabis-related business to store their funds and use financial lifelines with banks. Blunt said that if the SAFE Act were to become law, robberies would plunge tenfold or cut it at least 30%. Says as for now, the Bay Area's downtown business district has transformed into a ghost town as retail shops of all kinds are fortifying their doors and windows with plywood to prevent an epidemic of flash mob robberies. Says the spate of robberies merely reflects how the criminal justice system doesn't work under progressive rule. Their policies to lower penalties for shoplifting have royally backfired. And so remember that when it comes midterm time. It's all these idiots and that who decide that, well, we'll just defund the police. That is hung exactly on the progressive Dems. That is their policy. They own it. Nobody else can. And this is a result of that. All the cities in that are going to turn to crap because of their ridiculous policies. So aside from that, visualizing the uneven fallout of the inflation surge, we've talked quite a bit about that here over recent weeks. Says, with Christmas just 3 weeks away and the holiday shopping season in full force, now is the worst time of the year to be confronted with financial worries. And yet, as Statista's Felix Richter details below, millions of Americans are facing financial hardship due to the recent surge in consumer prices. Says according to a survey conducted by Gallup in November, 10% of U.S. adults have been caused severe financial hardship by the latest surge in inflation. Severe meaning that it might affect their ability to maintain their current standard of living. Another 42% face moderate hardship, meaning that price increases affect them but don't threaten their standard of living. So the graphic here shows us the uneven fallout. It says if you make less than 40 grand a year, 28% are feeling severe hardship, 42% feeling moderate hardship, and in green here, no hardship at all. That's about 29% for those making under 40 grand. If you're in the $40,000 to $99,000 bracket, it's a little bit more even, about 53% no hardship, and you got 8% and 38% respectively, severe to moderate. And then if you're 100 grand and more, obviously the effects are not felt as much. 71% no hardship, 28% moderate, and only 2% facing severe hardship. It says, making inflation woes worse is the fact that they affect lower income groups disproportionately. While it's relatively easy to shrug off price increases when it only reduces the amount of money left at the end of the month, it is much harder for people who struggled to make ends meet even before prices started surging. It says, as the chart above shows, the perceived effect of recent price increases varies significantly by income group. Says while 71% of those living in households with an annual income of less than 40 grand experience some kind of financial hardship these days, just 29% of those earning 100 grand or more claim to do so. Now, mind you, this is a snapshot in time. I don't know if it says, I guess it was November 3rd through the 16th, I guess is the time frame in which they did the survey. But mind you, we're just getting started, folks, with all the inflation because we have really yet to feel the effects of all the Fed money printing and that's been taking place over the last 18-20 months. So we have got a lot more room to run. And if you think that energy prices are sky high now, wait about another 6 months and we'll see, whether it be gas, whether it be natural gas, coal, whether it be food prices at the store shelves, you name it. It's going to get a hell of a lot worse. So aside from that, record backlog and inability to produce pushes Class 8 orders to the lowest in November in 26 years. This is a piece out of Freight Waves here. It says Class 8 truck orders in November were the lowest for that month in 26 years, reflecting a huge backlog of unbuilt trucks rather than a demand issue. Mind you, the trucking industry as a whole, we've talked about here, is probably down, about 60 to 80,000 drivers, I think it is. Something along those lines. Says the backlog of bookings in queue at major OEMs exceeded 14 months, according to ACT Research. That means that with the few exceptions, an order for a Class 8 power unit placed this month would be delivered in February of 2023. Says long backlog lead times resulting from ongoing supply constraints continue to pressure new order activity, said Kenny Veith, ACT President and Senior Analyst. Says those backlogs stretching into late 2022 and still no clear visibility about the easing of the everything shortage. Modest November order results suggest the OEMs are continuing to take a more cautious approach to booking orders so as not to extend the cycle of customer expectations management. ACT reported preliminary Class 8 orders of 9,800 in November. FTR Transportation Intelligence said its preliminary estimate was 9,500. Both analytics firms will report actual numbers for November around the middle of December. So production estimates are falling. FTR said orders were down 41% from October and 82% year over year. Supply chain uncertainty is the biggest reason for the lull. Says on a rolling 12-month basis, Class 8 orders total 393,000, more than the industry has capacity to build. ACT's latest production estimate for 2021 is 260,000, a number that has been adjusted downward several times. A shortage of semiconductors used in everything from power windows to safety systems has prompted truck makers to build and park new trucks for which they have orders but are unable to complete. And the paucity of new trucks has driven prices of late model used trucks skyward when they are even available. Says Canada-based auction house Ritchie Brothers reported that a 2020 Kenworth W990 sleeper cab sold for $166,110 in an auction in Alberta, Canada, last week. Says the low order numbers in November in no way are representative of total demand, said Don Ake, FTR Vice President of Commercial Vehicles. The weak volumes are because OEMs are managing their backlogs very carefully. Says in addition to inflated equipment prices, spot rates for freight are at record levels and contract rates are rising. When the manufacturing sector of the economy gets past the supply chain crisis, freight volumes will increase, Ake said. So payback for overbooking? ACT's October data, the last full month available, showed a Class 8 backlog of about 281,000 units. Now, based on the build rate during the month, the backlog to build ratio is 14.6 months because of supply challenges, Veith said. Component deliveries, especially semiconductors, have been unreliable since March, Ake said. OEMs booked a huge number of orders a year ago, expecting to be able to build at full capacity throughout 2021, which has proved unachievable. Says after overbooking almost every month in 2021, the OEMs are becoming extremely meticulous about scheduling commitments in 2022, Ake said. Once the OEMs are confident they can obtain the necessary production inputs, they will boost production and enter more orders. So bottom line, the trucking industry, the Class 8s net spoken of here, are hit by the very same thing that the GMs, the Fords, and everybody else is by way of shortages of chips and everything else. And so obviously if you don't have chips to, everything from power windows to safety systems and whatnot on these rigs, chances are they've got them probably 95% built sitting on a lot and waiting for parts to come in so that they can ship them off to the various dealers net around the country. If you remember right here, flashing back several months ago, we talked about Ford and how they were taking F-150s, for example, literally parking them all around Kentucky Motor Speedway. All of them sitting in lots all around the track waiting for chips. Can't deliver them. So anyway, last but not least, financially here this morning, Aramco chief warns of social unrest if fossil fuels are abandoned too quickly. Gee, that doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, does it? Says China has promised not to build more coal-fired power plants abroad, but it's scrambling to build more plants at home in the latest indication that coal, the dirtiest of fossil fuels, will likely be with us for some time. And while ESG has become the hot factor trade du jour, analysts who know the energy space have warned that a rush to renewables could lead to energy hyperinflation, and that the UN's goal of achieving global carbon neutrality by 2050 is more of a pipe dream that could have terrible consequences for humanity. Do you think they really care with Agenda 2030, with COP26, all the bloviating, the hot air, and everything that comes out of that? Bottom line, it's all just that. It's bloviating. There's no real targets. There's no real things to hold various countries and corporations to account. But yet, the ESG business, obviously, you won't be able to get a loan if, by chance, you don't have a plan. And we've seen how ridiculous some of those plans are in the last week or two through some of the articles that we covered right here. Says Amin Nasser, the chief executive of Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil producer, has called on global leaders to continue investing in fossil fuels in the years ahead, or run the risk of spiraling inflation and social unrest that could force them to jettison emissions targets altogether, according to the Financial Times. And I guess remind me here at the end here, I'll interject and add some thoughts to this, some of the things that have been going on. But Nasser was speaking at the World Petroleum Congress in Houston, Texas. He added that there's an assumption that the world can transition to green energy with the flip of a switch. But that's just not accurate. So they understand that publicly admitting that oil and gas will play an essential and significant role during the transition and beyond will be hard for some, Nasser told delegates at the WPC, one of the biggest gatherings of oil and gas executives in the world. But admitting this reality will be far easier than dealing with energy insecurity, rampant inflation, and social unrest as the prices become intolerably high and seeing net zero commitments by countries start to unravel. So this isn't the first hint of just how unrealistic climate change goals have become. Earlier this year, the IEA warned that all new gas and oil exploration projects would need to be abandoned immediately if the world were to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Now, Exxon is considered following through on this to try and appease ESG crazy investors. Nasser also warned that the world is facing an increasingly chaotic transition to green energy. Says the world is facing an ever more chaotic energy transition centered on highly unrealistic scenarios and assumptions about the future of energy, Nasser said. That oil prices feed through to inflation is hardly anything new. Says already higher oil and gas prices have forced President Biden to reckon with his climate goals. Despite Biden's promises to lead the U.S. on a transition away from oil, the resident tried to blunt the rise in oil prices by unloading millions of barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Oh, yeah, 50 million barrels. That ought to do it. Good job, Joe. By the way, if you've checked out any of your local gas pumps, you'll probably see the stickers on there. And funny story, we've got a local station here that had one on there, and apparently somebody decided to try to peel it off. The remnants are still there, but you get the idea. Says, but that, of course, is like slapping a band-aid on a bullet wound. The real problem is years of neglect and underinvestment in the energy patch as market forces suppressed commodity prices. Nasser touched upon this as well, telling the FT that the majority of key stakeholders in the industry and politics agreed on the risks of underinvestment, but were unwilling to say so openly. They say so in private, they should say the same in public, Nasser said. Put another way, virtue signaling about climate change and green energy will fall out of favor as soon as most consumers feel it in their pockets. And that's absolutely true. And the other thing that's interesting playing out behind the scenes is the fact that, we've heard these woke SJW mobs and that going after folks, pension plans, 401k plans, saying, hey, pull us out of all this terrible, dirty fossil fuel stuff. And they do. So, hence the underinvestment and that is playing out. But these guys are getting smart, see? And it's having the exact opposite effect. So they say, all right, you don't want to invest in our stuff that goes into your breadbasket of stuff and your 401ks and pensions and that. So what do these guys do? Well, you just open up a shell corporation, call it XYZ Corp, and guess what? Lo and behold, you're right back in business. And that's exactly what is playing out behind the scenes. So it's having exactly the opposite effect. Just like all this business of natural gas being bad, why are we seeing such an uptick in coal? If coal is so dirty, why are they sold out through all of next year and into 2023 already? But hey, never mind that. They think that all these solar panels and, of course, all these wind turbines will save us, right? Never mind the fact that you only get electricity and that for only 3 days a week and maybe 12 hours a day. So there's that. You just got to learn to live with that, folks. That's what it amounts to. Live with less. Build back better. All right, so enough of the ridiculousness out of the financial side. Red State's got this here today. It says Jesse Smollett's testimony about Don Lemon shows what a dumpster fire the clown news is. Oh, geez, it only gets worse. Says the battle between Chris Cuomo and Clown News is just starting to heat up, with Cuomo claiming that Clown News head Jeff Zucker knew all about the help that Chris was giving his brother on the sexual harassment allegations. Chris Cuomo has also reportedly hired attorneys and is preparing to sue the Clown News. But Cuomo isn't the only Clown News anchor covered in scandal. Cuomo's best buddy, Don Lemon, got smacked in 2 ways today. Says first, there were comments from the man who accused him of a sexual assault and battery back in 2018 in a bar in Long Island. Dustin Heiss claims that Lemon vigorously rubbed his genitalia, then shoved his hand into Hyde's face under his mustache while asked if he liked, obviously, P.Y or D.K, you get the idea. Says in response to Chris Cuomo's being fired, Heiss said that Clown News is a predator-protecting machine. They're a network rife with predators and perverts, Heiss told Fox News. Lemon will have to testify under oath in the near future, but it's good to see that there's finally some accountability happening. Heiss said he'd turned down settlement offers. Says they've tried offers, I'm assuming they meant, says they've tried to grind me down, they've attempted to intimidate witnesses in my case, they've released confidential information about me in an attempt to dox me. They are complicit. This is who they are, Heiss said. Now, Clown News has stood by Lemon so far in the case, but they also initially stood by Cuomo. Heiss has a lawsuit against Lemon, which is expected to be tried early next year. But that isn't all. Jesse Smollett may have just thrown Lemon under the bus during his testimony today. Smollett testified that he'd been in contact with Don Lemon during the early part of the Chicago Police Department's investigation into the phony attack on him. Now, he testified that one of the reasons he didn't want to turn over his phone to the police during the investigation was because Don Lemon texted him that the Chicago police didn't believe his account of what happened. Lemon was already said that he was in constant contact with Smollett early on in the case and that the story was personal to him, whatever that means. Megan Crepeau says he also says he declined to give his phone to CPD in part because he'd gotten a text from Don Lemon saying he'd gotten a text from CPD saying they don't believe me. Objections, then a sidebar. Oh, the ridiculousness of some of these cases playing out here today. Says, so why is Don Lemon tipping Smollett that the police don't believe him? Was Lemon trying to pass on information that he knew in his media capacity to help Smollett? Says that would sound similar in some ways to what Chris Cuomo did. Why are Clown News anchors becoming enmeshed with news subjects and subjects of criminal investigations? Says at least Lemon previously acknowledged to his audience that he had contact with Smollett. But again, if it's someone he knows and he's having conversations like that with him, that compromises Lemon's objectivity, not that he ever cares about that. Anyway, says, are any CNN hosts not using their sources to secretly help criminals cover up their scandals? Yeah, exactly. Clown News is going to need two new anchors, before long. So perhaps old Don Lemon's days at the Clown News may be coming to an end. Yeah, we might as well go for the trifecta. Why don't we get what's his name out of the way too? Old Baldicus. Can't think of his name off the top of my head. You know who I'm talking about. Nonetheless, Trump predicts outcome of the Putin-Biden encounter. This out here today, out of RT, says Donald Trump has mocked a scheduled call between U.S. resident Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin, comparing it to the New England Patriots playing against a high school football team. So then being asked about Biden's scheduled virtual meeting with Putin on Tuesday, during which the two will reportedly discuss Ukraine, Trump tore into the Biden admin and praised his own record of dealing with world leaders. Says, we never had any problems. Nobody was tougher on Russia than I was, and I liked Putin. Got along with him very well, Trump said on Newsmax's Spicer and Company, before boasting of his admin's opposition to Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline across Europe. Says, I got along with Putin, but I was tough with Putin. Tougher than anybody, ever. And tougher than anybody on China, the 45th U.S. president declared. I got along great with Kim Jong-un. I got along great with President Xi of China. And I got along well with Putin. But I was tough with all of them. Trump protested that the upcoming meeting between Biden and Putin would not be a fair match for our country, claiming, this is not a match that should even be allowed. And of course, there's the New England Patriots playing your high school football team. That's what you have right now, and that's probably a fair assessment. Says White House Press Secretary Jen Circleback Psaki announced last week that Biden would raise concerns about Russian military activities on the border with Ukraine and reaffirm the United States' support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine during their meeting, while also discussing other topics such as cybersecurity and bilateral relations. So there you have it, in the words of old DJT. Obviously not a fair fight. I got along with all of them, but I was tough. That's Trump for you, right? Anyway, aside from that, why you should come out of the closet with your conservative values. Interesting piece out of Town Hall here today. Says, I received a phone call on my radio show from a man who said, Dennis, I'm a gay conservative actor in Hollywood, and it is far easier to come out of the closet as gay than as a conservative. That call was in the 1980s. Says, while the current cancel culture, the firing, humiliation, disparagement, and smearing of conservatives is exponentially worse today than 30 years ago, it is not new. Says, as a result, the great majority of Americans who are conservative, that is, about half the country, hide their true beliefs. They fear saying anything that differs with the left. This would include such reprehensible sentiments as, with all its flaws, America is the finest country ever made. Men do not give birth. There are only two sexes, and a person's color is the least important thing about them. Well, the greatest problem in black life is not whites, but a lack of fathers. A man who becomes a woman and then competes in women's sports is cheating. Posting to social media a video about a renowned epidemiologist, virologist, or medical doctor who asserts that ivermectin and or hydroxychloroquine with zinc, when used early enough, almost always prevents hospitalizations for COVID-19. Yep, that's a big no-no to say. Says the list is far longer than this, but if you think even this list overestimates or overstates the problem, put any of these statements on any mainstream social media platform and see what happens. See if any relatives drop from your Facebook or even from their lives. See what your employer says or does. See what Twitter or Facebook does to your account. We might as well add YouTube and Google to that as well, right? Says there are valid reasons to fear publicly differing with the left. So then, what arguments can be offered on behalf of coming out of the closet? The first is this. For every person you alienate, you will likely bring at least one new, wonderful person into your life. Putting aside issues of courage, of standing for what is right, of saving America from those working to destroy it, there is a great, selfish reason to come out of the closet. Kindred spirits. In effect, good people will discover you. In 2020, I received an email from a young woman in her second year at Harvard who told me that my book that explains the left in America, Still the Best Hope, had changed her from liberal to conservative. Needless to say, I was intrigued to learn more about her, and, as it happened, she lives, as I do, in Los Angeles. So I invited her to sit on my radio show. Says while speaking to her during commercial breaks, I was impressed enough to ask if she would be willing to describe her political and moral metamorphosis on the radio. Now, I warned her that appearing on the Dennis Prager show and talking about her conservative views would likely lead to some lost friends, angry, if not alienated, relatives, and attacks back at Harvard. I made that case persuasively enough to give her pause and ask, "May I call my mother?" Says, she stepped out to make the call. When she returned to the studio, she announced, "I'm coming on." About a half a year later, she made another appearance on my show, and I asked her what happened after her initial appearance. "Says I went through 2 weeks of hell," she responded. As predicted, she lost friends she had had since elementary school. Some relatives limited her contact with her, and some students back at Harvard regarded her as a indecipherable sellout. "Then what happened?" I asked. Says, "Then I entered heaven," she responded. She offered two big reasons. One was that she began to sleep better than she had in years. The other was a number of kindred spirits, all quality people, who reached out to her, some of whom became friends. Regarding reason one, sleeping better, staying in the closet exacts a serious mental price on a person. One should not think only coming out of the closet exacts a price. As for the second reason, virtually no price paid for coming out of the closet is comparable to the rewards of doing so. There is little as happiness inducing as having kindred spirits in your life. Now, is that worth losing one's job? If you are sure you will lose your job and no other job paying a comparable salary will be available, only you can answer that question. Similarly, if one of your children will stop talking to you because you are not woke, it is not for me to advise you what to do. But there are no other compelling arguments not to come out of the closet. And there are at least two other arguments for coming out. Says one is that you will respect yourself more, and so will others, including quite possibly one or more of your children and your grandchildren, if you have any. And two, you will help save this country from tyranny. For some, that should suffice. And that was a piece out of Dennis Prager talking about his experience over the years. Many good pieces out of PragerU over the years, and of course, even here recently, the 5 parts to the tyranny in that is playing out across this country, especially the latest one I think that I had maybe talked about was what's playing out in front of the Supreme Court with the Mississippi case and what is going on with Roe versus Wade. If you have not seen that piece talking about the 5 ethical questions, I would encourage you to check that out. And last but not least on the morning here, it is Pearl Harbor Day here in the United States. The United States observes the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor attack. This out of PJ Media here this morning. Says 80 years ago this morning, citizens and service members alike in Hawaii faced terror as Japanese planes from their Imperial Navy rained fire on the island in a devastating and surprise attack. The assault quickly pulled the United States into a world-changing war, the largest and most destructive in human history. In the end, the Allied forces triumphed over the fascism of Germany, Italy, and Japan. The latter nation, by attacking the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, ensured that a titanic struggle for mastery of the vast Pacific Ocean and its surrounding waterways would be waged to the ultimate end. The Second World War cost 75 million people their lives, most of them civilians. None of the U.S. Navy's 7 active aircraft carriers were at Pearl Harbor that fateful morning. More than 2,000 servicemen, about half from the USS Arizona alone, were killed and nearly 1,200 wounded. Says with about 150 veterans, including a few World War II survivors, making the long trip to Oahu, Tuesday could be the last opportunity for locals to meet veterans from the greatest generation. Says I remember my mother crying and Roosevelt coming on the radio declaring war. My stepfather Ron Friedman, who was in first grade in 1941, explained to me. We were told to get blackout shades and there were air raid warnings. Kids starting playing with soldiers. But for me at my age, life was mostly the same. We probably didn't realize the enormity of it. Friedman said all his older cousins joined the U.S. Army, with one killed while flying his aircraft near London. Today, there are 2 war memorials at Pearl Harbor, one for the battleship USS Arizona and the other for the battleship USS Utah. More than 1 million people visit each year. Moments of silence and memory begin just before 8 a.m. local time Tuesday. So a little bit of a reminder as to the significance of today being Pearl Harbor Day, now some 80 years ago, transacting, and the price on that we paid as a result. And of course, many probably know the backstory behind the scenes of what actually played out, and that it was not really a surprise to draw the U.S. into a war. But obviously, those times are upon us again, and just a little bit different fashion. And why we continue to fight here behind the scenes, the informational war, the spiritual war that we find ourselves in for the heart and soul of this nation. And so we fight on. All right, well, that is going to do it for the broadcast here this morning. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. And we'll see you back here tomorrow, same time, same place, same bat channel. Take care. God bless everybody.